Hello and welcome to this presentation from the Urban Penguin. My name is Andrew Mallett, and in this presentation we're going to take a look at systemd timer units. Now, if you've attended any training course, you'll probably become aware of using systemd services and maybe even the targets. However, little attention is given through to timer units, so we're going to correct that now by taking a look at systemd timers and seeing how these timer units can replace services such as cron, being able to schedule jobs on a regular basis and give you much better reporting on that. So when you're ready, we'll take a look.
Remember, we're helping you learn Linux.
And here we are. Look at this, our glorious command line, and a command line that we're going to be taking a look at on an Ubuntu 22.04 system. If I run the hostname CTL, we can see then it is Ubuntu 22.04, but to be honest, we should be able to carry out this demonstration on pretty much any recent systemd-based machine, so it doesn't really matter. Now, to begin with, we're going to use systemctl, and we can run this as a standard user to list our timer units, so list-timers. As we go through, we can start seeing when timers will run and when they last run. Now, I've just fired up this machine. It's based in AWS, so we don't have any last times showing at the moment. But if we look at, let's say, that top timer, it's got 2 minutes and 35 seconds left, and it's going to run at 15:55 and 33 seconds. So you can see the idea that we get a lot more reporting available to us than we ever would with the traditional cron. Plus, we don't need any additional service running. This is all done by systemd itself. So we don't need the overhead of having cron running. Now, these timers do show in real time. So if I go back and list the timers, we can go back and see now that that top timer has 1 minute 38 seconds left to run. So it gives us an idea, but we'll see this better when we start looking at creating and editing our own timer units and seeing how they can be scheduled. Using sudo and systemctl, obviously we need to elevate our privileges to be able to create a new unit file. We're going to use --force because it doesn't exist. And obviously we want to do a full edit. Again, it doesn't exist. We're going to create a file called touchfile.timer. We're going to be having an associated service that just runs the touch command against a file. So we can do something simple to demonstrate our timer units. So with this done, we can hit the big enter key and it's going to open up in our Nano text editor. Nano is the default editor for editing systemd-based files, even on Red Hat-based systems. So don't be surprised if it opens up on Nano on your Red Hat-based systems as well. The first thing we're going to do is all unit files describe a unit block. So we can put in the unit block. All we really need in here is our description. So we're just going to put a simple description here. Description equals touch file timer. As we then move down, we can create our timer block, and inside our timer block, this is where we can set the schedule. So we can specify that if the system was booting, we would do it on boot sec. Now, that's the number of seconds, but we can write seconds, or we can write minutes, or we can write hours, or even micro and nanoseconds if we really wanted to. So I'm just going to put 10M for 10 minutes here. On unit active. So once our unit has been activated, how many seconds after it's been activated? And we can specify here 300 seconds. That's going to be 5 minutes. So if we didn't put in anything else, it's going to run 10 minutes after boot and then every 5 minutes once the unit is active. Now, we want to run it quite frequently. We wouldn't necessarily need it running this frequency for most jobs, but we want to be able to see it run and maybe run once again. But we can also build in some randomization. What we don't necessarily want is similar services running at the same sort of schedule all of the time. So we can go through then and randomize delay seconds of adding then up to another 300 seconds to this. So it might run every 5 minutes or it might run every 10 minutes. but this is going to be randomized every time the unit is activated. So when it runs, let's say at 4:05, the next time it might run at 4:10. The next time it might run at 4:20, where we've added on an extra 10 minutes rather than just an extra 5 minutes. But it's going to be a randomized up to 300 seconds each time that it runs. The install is just going to mean that we can enable our service, and we're going to specify that we want it enabled in our timers.target. And that's it. That's all that we need. With that done, we can go through and save our changes. So I'm just using a Control and S, and then a Control and X to exit. We can always go through and use the cat command just to check what we have actually written. That's never such a bad idea, just to make sure what we think we wrote has actually been saved back to our file. We can see it adds in a comment. That's not part of the file, but that's just showing where we're reading the file from. But we can see then that it looks good to go. But we're also going to have to do the same type of thing, but to the back-end service unit. By default, a timer will look for a service unit with exactly the same name. So our first element that we put in is going to be the unit block again, the same as we did before, and we can put a description for the service unit. Now, of course, they're going to appear very much the same, so it doesn't really matter so much what we put in. After all, this is just a description. But of course, instead of adding in our timer block, we're now putting in our service block. But this is going to be very simple. Our service is not long running. It just runs a command once. So we can specify the type to be one shot. And we can specify the command that should run when we start our service. So exec start. And we're going to put this to equal our USR bin touch command. And then all we can say is that we're going to use it against a file, our /temp, and then my file. The first time round, it will create the file. Subsequently, it's going to update the last modified time. We don't need to put the install element in because we don't enable these services. They are triggered by the timer unit. And that's it. That's our two files created now. But we do need to make sure that systemd knows about these files. So we can use the sudo and systemctl and daemon reload. Now with that done, systemd now knows about the file, and I can go back and enable my timer unit. I don't technically need to start it, but I'm going to. Minus now means then that it will trigger the service unit immediately, and we're going to use our touch file timer. So that means our timer unit is going to be enabled, and it is going to trigger the service unit at this point. We're going to be able to see that this has happened. If I go back and take a look at listing my timers, we can see now the touch file timer ran at 1640 seconds, and it's leaving it then with 46 seconds left to run before it executes again, and we can see it's going to run then at 16:05 and 40 seconds. So we can see a little bit of the randomization coming in. Instead of it being exactly 300 seconds or 5 minutes, it's a little bit over. And of course, another way of checking that it's run is to go through and list our temp and my file. And again, we can see then that that was created at 4 o'clock, 1600 hours. So everything looks good. But of course, it's not going to happen again for another 5 minutes. But if we go back looking at it now, we can see again those timers are progressing. It's 1 minute 27 seconds since its last run, leaving it 3 minutes and 32 seconds before it's going to run again. So we can keep this running. But let's just clip a little bit out of the video and returning to our screen. Now we are where we have left off, so we can quit out of that, list our timers again, And we can see now that it ran 30 seconds ago at 16:05 and 44 seconds, and it's next going to be running at 16:10 and 44 seconds. So we can see with this one, it's running pretty much 5 minutes afterwards, but it could be running anywhere between 5 minutes and 10 minutes after the last execution. And that's the idea of the randomization that we've added in. And hopefully this has made your timer units just that little bit more clear for you.
All that is left to say is thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this, then you are probably sadder than I first thought. For more of this drivel, please subscribe, like and comment to @TheUrbanPenguin.